Welcome to the Clayton Tyner podcast, where I help you view current issues through the lens of the ancient wisdom of Scripture. This week, comedian Louis C.K. made waves in a newly resurfaced clip where he suggested a novel immigration policy on Joe Rogan's podcast. Louis has decided that mass immigration, making America less prosperous and more dangerous, is actually a good thing. America is spoiled and shouldn't stand out so much from other countries in terms of prosperity and affluence. Is he right? Is it unfair for America to be so wealthy and so safe? Speaking of Americans, a new poll shows many American adults cannot name a single branch of government. Increasingly, we are a population that complains about our country while having no actual knowledge of how it functions. Why does this issue keep getting worse, and what does it mean for the future of America? Meanwhile, one of our branches of government has updated or downgraded, depending on who you ask, their dress code. No longer are senators expected to dress to impress. So does this matter? Are suits and ties a stodgy relic of the past? How do we think about dress codes and other traditions? And what is the real issue at the heart of this matter? All that and one last segment looking at the allegations against comedian turned podcaster Russell Brand. Serious misconduct has been alleged in the British media, and consequently, Brand has been culturally canceled in some big ways. I went to Brand's own writings on the subject of his past indiscretions to look for clues on how he might think about this, and was very interested by what I found. We'll discuss all of this and more on episode 33 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. Episode 33.
Another one.
Let's go. We've got the soundboard loaded up. We already have so many sounds. Do we really need
another one?
Probably not, but we have got
another one.
I love it. I'm so glad that you joined us. For those who have been rocking with the podcast for a long time, I just want to thank you guys. Thank you for just being so consistent, for sharing. I want to encourage everyone to subscribe. If you are listening to audio only, my main focus is on the YouTube channel right now. I'm going to continue putting it out through the RSS feed. But do me a favor, come over to youtube.com/Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner, and subscribe to this channel as well. You can also hit that thumbs up, get busy in the comments. You can share this with your friends. Man, I've had some people just write really kind comments on social media platforms, sharing this, encouraging people to check it out. What we try to do on here is just to break through the division and the sound bites and get a more nuanced understanding by looking at what's going on in our world through a biblical lens, through a Christian worldview to the best of our ability. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Clayton Tyner. Again, that's Tyner. And if you want to know what my real job is, you can go to youtube.com/metachurch. That's META church. I'd love for you to subscribe there. We're in a series on Jonah right now. It's a gospel series, and man, we're learning a lot and having a great time. There's a lot going on in the news right now. We have a lot to talk about. So without further ado, let's get to our 3 points. Louis C.K., who owns multiple $1 million+ properties and enjoys private security in elite neighborhoods, has apparently decided that America needs completely open borders so we can be less prosperous and more dangerous. Is this an elaborate troll by a professional comedian? Why is it often so easy for those most privileged to have the most radical ideas? And what would actually happen if the U.S. sunk into some kind of despair? Now, Louis has been a comic for a long time. He's had an embattled career over the last 10 years or so as he dealt with his own allegations and his own issues. He's now made a return and is putting out comedy specials. Again, he has a very self-deprecating humor and a very dry humor. I mean, he will do entire bits where you're pretty sure he's joking, and at the end of it, he is, but he sounds just dead serious the entire time. And so there's a big part of me that almost has to believe that this is a troll. But this video is from about 9 months ago. It's recently resurfaced, and there hasn't been anything that has come out. As far as I understand the context around this, it would appear he actually means this, which is quite wild. So let's go to the video and see what has everyone in a stir.
But my feeling is they should open the border, and just let them pour it, let everybody pour in, and
And then the answer, which is, well, then there'll be all these problems. Yes, there should be. It shouldn't be so great here, is what I'm saying.
Now this just sounds like the setup, and then the punchline is going to come. The punchline just never comes. He continues.
America. It shouldn't be. It's a weird thing to sequester a certain group of people and try to keep upping their lifespan and their lifestyle, and just keep trying to increase that for this group of people. And then this pressure of people trying to come in so they can enjoy it. And then it gets worse and worse down here. I mean, I'm not in Canada. It's really just from down here. There's something wrong with that. That's not a system that's working. And it forces people to do cruel things to other people. There's a lot.
So this is his basic take, that America has it too good. And because America has it so good, it puts undue pressure and burden on other people. And so the answer would be to just open up everything. He says, Canada's doing fine. Open the southern border. And of course, it isn't just Mexico who's coming through the southern border. The southern border is kind of the known entry point. So people from all over the world are coming through. And we talked a week or two ago about immigration, the need for reform, and how boundaries and compassion are not competing interests. They actually rely on each other to both function well in a society. We talked through all of that, but his idea is just completely open it up, because there's this undue pressure because we have it too good in America. But he acknowledges that it will get worse. Things will get worse. Things will get less prosperous. Wealth will go down. Crime will go up. The American experiment will have a very interesting piece of data placed into it, and we'll have to see what happens. And he assumes it will be worse, but he thinks we should do it to just kind of like even out the playing field. Now, people have pointed out, rightfully, that like most people who are the elites of society, who have the majority of the money of society, who have most of the influence in society, they have all these great ideas that they're not practicing in any way really at all. So people started looking up where Louis C.K. lives, and the answer is he owns multiple $1 million+ properties. His main home is an apartment in New York City, estimated at $3.85 million. It's on Fifth Avenue. According to newstandupcomedy.com, apart from the New York City property, Louis C.K. also allegedly owns a luxury mansion in the Hamptons, which he bought for $2.4 million. As per the above mentioned website, this particular property has a traditional shingle style. Okay, who cares about that? It's got a swimming pool. The Hamptons mansion has security cameras installed all around, as well as a hired private security team for extra company. Louis C.K. also has a luxurious beachside villa in Florida and owns other real estate properties across the country. So I've got rules for the rest of you, and then, I'm going to live how I live. And the reality is, if we just completely open the border up, the people who would be affected are not the people like Louis C.K., not the people who live in $1 million mansions and have their own private security. Their lifestyle wouldn't really change much at all, not for the foreseeable future. However, the people who would actually struggle the most are the people who are already struggling, are the people who are in America and are Americans who are already lower down on the socioeconomic ladder. That's whose jobs would be in jeopardy. That's whose neighborhoods would potentially be affected. And number one, this is just so out of touch. And this is a pattern that we're seeing with the wealthy and the quote unquote elites in our society, is they have all of these grand ideas that the implications of would never actually touch them. You'll notice that there are many people, especially billionaires for some reason, as if we need more reason to picture billionaires as like evil geniuses, stroking some like white kitten, in their dungeon or something. We have all these billionaires talking about depopulation, and you'll notice that never really affects them. Some of them have big families with lots of kids. You have all of the elites talking about global warming and carbon footprint, and they're the only people who fly around on private jets, and they make their excuses for it. And they're, the only people who have the money to buy properties that are on the coast when they tell you that you can't drive your car because of the rising ocean levels, And so there's this massive hypocrisy, and scripture actually speaks to this. Prophet Amos says this in Amos chapter 6. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion, and to those who feel secure on the hill of Samaria. That it's interesting, on the hills of Samaria, those people who have the hillside villas, who have the $3.85 million mansion with a private security. The notable people in this first of the nations, those the house of Israel comes to, cross over to Calneh and see, go from there to the great Hamath, then go down to the Gath of the Philistines. Are you better than these kingdoms? Is their territory larger than yours? You dismiss any thought of the evil day and bring in a reign of violence. They lie on beds inlaid with ivory, sprawled out on their couches, and dine on lambs from the flock and calves from the stall. They improvise songs to the sound of the harp and invent their own musical instruments like David. They drink wine by the bowlful and anoint themselves with the finest oils, but do not grieve over the ruin of Joseph. Therefore, they will now go into exile as the first of the captives, and the feasting of those who sprawl out will come to an end. Woe to those who are so out of touch that you're putting forward policy ideas that become popular because you are influential, and they become popular with the people who will actually be affected by these terrible ideas. Meanwhile, you are sequestered and secluded with your own private security and all of your own systems, and you're not inviting people into your home. You're not opening up your $1 million mansions for people to come into. You're pushing for policies based on this idea of some kind of guilt and some kind of like systemic issues in your own life, in your own mind, that will ultimately affect everybody but you. And so what would actually happen if the United States were to decline? This idea that the world would be a better place if America wasn't so spoiled and so set apart. The truth is, the United States is responsible for the majority of worldwide economic impact, worldwide global security, and worldwide humanitarian aid. The uplifting of the West over the last 200 years has done more to put an end to many wars, to lift more people out of poverty, to feed more people around the world, to bring economic stability and trade stability than the world has seen in all of human history. And Louis has to know that because he knows something about human history. And you can look at like basically what it meant to be a human forever, and just to live was very, very difficult. Everyone's life was very difficult. We would not trade places as like just a middle class, middle income person today with the kings and queens of the 1400s. We wouldn't do it. Our lives would be immeasurably worse and immeasurably less convenient. We wouldn't survive in the ancient world. We are so spoiled, and we're living in the midst of so much comfort and affluence that we get these radical harebrained ideas. The truth is, if the United States sank into despair, or if the global West sank into despair, it would not be good for the countries who are, trying to get in. Now, do we need reform? Sure. We need boundaries, and we need compassion, and we need clear systems for people to be able to better their lives. But just fully opening the borders out of some form of guilt when you're living up on your mansion, that's so clearly just not at all the answer. A Penn study finds that almost 1/5 of American adults cannot name a single branch of government. With the rise of social media, everyone now has a platform to complain about policy and governance, but fewer and fewer people actually understand how policies are made or the process to go from an idea to a law. Why does this trend exist, and what might it mean for our future? If we look at this study, it's from the University of Pennsylvania. It says, many don't know key facts about the U.S. Constitution. This is an Annenberg civics study. It goes on to say the Annenberg Public Policy Center's annual nationally representative survey finds that when U.S. adults are asked to name the specific rights guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution, only one right is recalled by most of the respondents: freedom of speech, which 77% of people can name. The Civics Knowledge Survey, released annually to celebrate Constitution Day, September 17th, also finds that although 2/3 of Americans can name all three branches of government, 10% can name two, 7% can name only one, and 17% cannot name any. That's almost 20% of American adults, like 1 out of every 5, can't name a single one of the branches of government. As in the recent past, the Annenberg Constitution Day Civic Survey was fielded in a year of high-profile events that propelled the workings of government into the daily news cycle. It's worrisome, it goes on to say, that 1 in 6 adults cannot name any of the branches of government, and that only 1 in 20 can name all 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment. One is unlikely to cherish or work to protect freedoms one does not know one has, and will have trouble holding elected and unelected leaders accountable if one does not understand the nature and prerogatives of each branch and the ways in which the power of each is kept in check. You can imagine this. I mean, if you work in any kind of industry, you have to know how your industry functions if you're going to staff it well in order to move forward in the future. I'm the lead pastor of a local church, and so I have the final say in our hiring decisions. And if I have no idea how our children's ministry functions, then how am I going to do a good job parsing through the candidates in order to put somebody in that position? If I have no idea how our Sunday services run, or what their function is, or what the point is, or what the key roles are, how can I possibly staff those in an effective way? The answer is you just can't. And the way that our government works is not, one person or one small group of people who are just picking and choosing who gets to run things. We are a democracy, which means it's all of us coming together and picking someone out of our country to represent us in the executive branch as the president. We're picking people to represent us in the legislative branch as senators and Congress people. We are picking those 2 branches, which ultimately nominate and then vote through the people who are in the judicial branch of our government and the Supreme Court. And people don't understand this. And so why is this happening? I think that there are 3 reasons that we have abandoned wisdom. And Proverbs 4 says, do not abandon wisdom, and she will watch over you. Love her, and she will guard you. Wisdom is supreme. So get wisdom, and whatever else you get understanding. 3 reasons that we don't know anything about the Constitution, and worse than not knowing anything, 3 reasons that Americans as a whole, more and more, just don't even care. We have become complacent for 3 reasons. Number 1, I believe comfort leads to complacency. Proverbs 132 says, for the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. We have become complacent because we are comfortable. And you see this throughout time. The new trend is that men are always thinking about the Roman Empire. Women are shocked by asking their boyfriends and husbands, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And men apparently think about this all the time. I was comforted knowing I'm not the only one. And the Roman Empire is significant because there is a lot of historical data on it, and because it was like the most dominant force on earth for quite some time. And of course, it doesn't exist anymore. And one of the things that you read about when you see what happened in the Roman Empire is people became very comfortable. There was more innovation, there was more domination. People became comfortable, and comfort leads you to complacency. You see this inside of relationships. Like in marriage, a lot of times people get married, and marriage can be difficult at first, and you learn how to live together, and you have some kids, and you just get comfortable, and you take it for granted, and you quit going out on dates together, and you quit building new skill sets, and you quit being romantic, and you quit paying attention, and you quit having shared interests, and you quit being sexually intimate, and on and on. Comfort leads to complacency, and pretty soon you're in a marriage that everyone's miserable with, and they end in divorce, and you can't even really tell why. And comfort, we're so comfortable. On one hand, in our country, we're like always in some kind of crisis, a global cooling crisis, a global warming crisis, a social crisis, a political crisis, a constitutional crisis, a crisis of war, throughout our history. We're in all this crisis. We're also so comfortable. We just like scroll on phones for hours and hours a day. We relax. We live in climate controlled environments. We work. You can see this in what people are pushing for. Like the auto union workers are on strike right now, the people who make our automobiles. And they're like, we want to work no more than 32 hours a week. We only want to work 4 days a week. We want a 60% increase in pay. And it's like, sure, man. I mean, go for it, I guess. But that's wild. Like, we want even more comfort. We want more money to buy more crap we don't need, and we want to work less, and we just want to chill. And Gen Z and like younger millennials, and of course younger millennials my age as well, are like, why do we have to work? We should just be socialists and everything provided for us. We're so comfortable, and comfort leads to complacency. And so you're not educated, and you're not involved, and you just listen to the little talking points, and you really are like, whatever just keeps me comfortable, whatever keeps the ball moving down the field. And so I don't really need to know how the whole thing works, as long as I'm like well fed and taken care of and living in some form of affluence. I'm fine. The other thing I think leads to complacency is corruption. Corruption leads to complacency. Proverbs 22:16 says, one who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth, and one who gives gifts to the rich, both come to poverty. And the reality is, we know there is corruption in our government. It's just open. They used to have to kind of try to like hide it, and they were ashamed of it, and they've, no, we're not corrupt at all. We're just representatives of the American people. It's so in our face now. It's just so obvious, the lobbyists and the kickbacks and all of just the hidden things and all of the bills. Part of why people don't pay attention to the legislative branch is because they put together these bills that are, 14,000 pages long. And they say, oh, we're just trying to build some infrastructure. It's an infrastructure bill, and it's like, well, it's 14,000 pages long. It's like longer than, 27 copies of the Bible. And no ordinary person can read it. And then they vote on it in 2 days. The Congress people can't even read it. The senators can't even read it. And we all know the reason that it's, 14,000 pages long is because everyone is paying off all of these crooked deals that gave them their campaign finance so they could get elected. And so now they have to keep the lobbyists happy instead of actually just looking out for the American people. And so they waste our money, and they have so many conflicts of interest, and they're so corrupt. And you look at the people who go in and they're making, $140,000 a year as a senator, and they have like a $200 million net worth, and they've made all of their money by making strategic moves in the stock market because they know what's going to happen, because they have insider information, and they're passing the laws that then affect the stock market. And so they're like beating the stock market better than the best analysts in the world. Like they can outcompete artificial intelligence because they're the people who are pulling the levers that affect the laws that affect the stock market. It's so corrupt, and we just know it. And corruption leads to complacency. And I will say, for most people who are my age, the sentiment is, even if they do vote, like, I'll vote, but like, why does it matter? You see that the way laws actually get enacted now hardly ever actually come through the legislative branch. And those are the legislators. They make the laws. They write the laws. That's how it's supposed to happen. But often what happens is you just have whoever the president is, and they make executive orders, and they hope that either the Supreme Court or the legislative branch doesn't overturn it or strike it down. And so they're the executive. They're supposed to execute the laws. And instead, they're now writing the laws. Well, that's not their job. But you don't know that because 1 out of every 5 people can't name a single branch of government.
Wow.
So, we're just complacent. It's like, well, they're not even doing things the way they're supposed to do them. And people are putting people on the Supreme Court because what they really want is the Supreme Court to more or less pass or enact laws themselves. So the president makes laws, and the Supreme Court makes laws, and the legislators who are supposed to make laws don't make the laws. And then in the executive branch, we have a million different 3-letter agencies, and they make laws. There were crazy examples of this in 2020, and I understand that was an unprecedented time. But the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, made it to where people who owned rental properties couldn't evict people even if they didn't pay. That's a law. And they're the CDC, part of the executive branch. They're just like the fourth branch of government that doesn't exist. And so people are just bleeding out money on rental properties, and nothing's been passed by our legislators. And so Comfort leads to complacency. We're comfortable. You know what? Whatever you guys are doing, it's fine as long as I have like enough junk food to eat and HVAC, and then that's fine. And corruption leads to complacency because we don't trust you guys anyway. You know, you're just looking out for yourself. And every time you do another thing that is super corrupt, we're just like,
Another one.
there's another one. We're helpless to it. And the other thing is crisis. Crisis leads to complacency. And so you have people who are comfortable and they don't really care as long as they're comfortable. And then you have a whole nother part of our society here in America, which are people who are barely getting by. You know, they're living off of government means. We have a huge homeless population. We have people just the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis, people who are addicted to drugs. That is their idol. That is their God. They will do anything for it. They will sell anything. They will go anywhere. They'll live on the streets. We have people who are in these cycles generationally where they just cannot seem to get free. They live in crisis. We've also seen throughout our history, wars are used, crisis. And when crisis comes, people are willing to give up an extraordinary amount of power. When COVID came, that was a crisis. And everyone was willing to give up freedoms and give up rights because crisis leads to complacency. You guys know I've spent a lot of time over in Haiti, and I went to Haiti in 2010, shortly after the earthquake. And our pastor over there, Pastor John Alix, he was describing the Haitian government and that they have, some form of democracy. But he said something that I will never forget. He said, democracy cannot exist when everyone is hungry because crisis does not allow you to think about the bigger picture. He said, the way that you win office is you just show up the most times with free bread. You just show up the most times and hand out meals. Because when everyone on the island is starving, then that's going to be ultimately what guides their thinking. We have these three areas: comfort, corruption, and crisis. They all lead to complacency. All three of those are a part of Americans' day every day. We're overwhelmed by the world that we're living in. And so we're complacent and we don't know much about our Constitution and we don't know much about our rights and we don't care much about it and we don't know how our government works. And we're the people hiring the people for that position. Without an understanding of how the government works, political leaders can make promises that they don't even have the capacity to deliver on. We see this all the time. Political leaders come in, in the 2020 election, everyone's like, I'm going to stop COVID. I'm going to defeat it. As soon as I have president in front of my name, I can just say, hey, COVID, enough of that. You just stop that. And all of a sudden, wow, it's gone. And of course, that's not how things work. Everyone runs and says, like right now in 2024, you hear a lot of the field on the right, and they're like, man, when I get into office, in 24 hours, the war in Ukraine will be over. Wow. That's quite a promise. Now, can they actually deliver on that? Can they alone, as the executive of the company, of the country, the executive branch, can they alone do that? Maybe, maybe explain to me in the comments exactly how in 24 hours, maybe they will. Maybe they have the exact plan. Well, what I know is without an understanding of how the government actually works, you don't even have a way to assess the promises that are being made. And those promises are being made to us. So we'll put them in that position. And we don't even know. If you don't know what a senator does, if you don't know what the legislative branch does and how it operates, if you don't understand like the right and the left and who has the majorities in which house and how a law actually gets passed, then you will be duped by politicians again and again who make these wild promises that you have no way of vetting because you don't understand how the government even functions. You don't understand your rights. Politicians are making promises all the time that they'll do things that are against our constitutional rights, which means even if they make an executive order and get it passed through, it's going to get struck down by the Supreme Court because they're the guardians of our Constitution. And so it's worth our time to learn these things. And remember where we started. Don't abandon wisdom, and she will watch over you. Love her, and she will guard you. Wisdom is supreme, so get wisdom. And whatever else you get understanding. Let's talk about the new dress code in the Senate. Last week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced that they were relaxing the long-held dress code for the 100 U.S. senators. They could now choose what they wear on the Senate floor. This is being called the Fetterman Rule, as the Pennsylvania senator has been wearing gym shorts and hoodies around the Capitol building this year. Some say It's 2023. Who cares about dress codes? Others are appalled that one of the highest offices in the land is losing its decorum. I believe these conversations are hiding the larger issues at play, and I do believe that there are some much larger issues. For anyone who actually knows me, or maybe who attends Meta Church or who watches us online, your thought might be, is this the guy to talk to us about dress codes?
No!
Okay, so maybe. If you know anything about Meta Church, we're very relaxed in how we dress. And we have tried to create a culture, like James talks about, people coming into your house or coming into the banquet and showing partiality or favoritism to people based on how they're dressed. And I grew up in religious environments where people were ostracized or put aside because they didn't have the right dress code to walk into the Sunday service. They didn't have the suit and tie. They didn't have the dress that went down far enough. They didn't have the pantyhose. That was back in my church days. Everyone had to wear pantyhose. Everyone, men and women, had to wear pantyhose. No, I'm just kidding. It's just the women. But everyone had to dress nice, And Jesus came and he showed up to the people who didn't have the dress code down, and they didn't have the social etiquette down. These are the people that he went to. And so in the church context, we've created an environment where people feel comfortable to come in exactly as they are. And we feel like God has really blessed that. And we don't throw shade on any of the churches around us in San Antonio who do have a culture of suit and tie, if that works for them and they're promoting the gospel and people are coming to Jesus. And we are all the way for that. It takes all different cultures in the church. And that's why God calls all the different saints and equips the saints to do the work of ministry in their unique ways. However, it's not true that we have no dress code. Now, for people who are coming in, as long as you're not just butt naked, you can come to Meta Church. We're like really, really relaxed. On stage, the people who are going to be on stage as musicians or speakers or preachers, we do have some guidelines. One thing for me, it's always been this way, even back when I was a musician. I never let my band wear shorts on stage. To me, it just doesn't look professional. Now, if you're from kind of higher church, then you would come and see me with jeans with holes in them and lots of tattoos and think that we just completely look professional. So I understand that there's, scales to that and there's different standards for different people. I don't like shorts on stage. We don't do that. We have a few other things that we ask people to follow as guidelines. Also, in different environments where I'm playing roles, like when I am officiating a funeral or when I'm directing a wedding, or in certain other environments that I'm invited into, I dress for those occasions. I own a suit and tie. That's what I wear when I do funerals, because it is a serious and somber moment. I'm not going to wear holey jeans and my scoop neck shirt. I'm going to wear a suit and tie. When I marry people, unless they ask me to dress casual, which some of our people will, but unless they ask for that, I show up in a suit and tie. And so I believe in dressing for the occasion. And the rule is something like, when you're trying to create inclusivity, then you allow for greater and greater range of casual and for a greater scope of dress and design and the way that people like to carry themselves and dress themselves. When you're doing something that is by nature exclusive, not everyone's invited to the funeral. Not everyone's invited to the wedding. It's a moment in time. It's something that's happening. Then I dress pretty formal, suit, and I actually don't usually wear a tie, but I would if they asked me to. And so there's two sides to this, and there's been arguments by great thinkers throughout history. G.K. Chesterton said, tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. That's what he calls tradition. That's a very positive view of tradition. Like, we should know where we come from. And there is this tradition within the Senate when you're on the floor that you dress to show that this matters and I'm showing up and this is important and this is formal. Ralph Waldo Emerson had a completely different take. He said, society is always taken by surprise at any new example of common sense. Society is always taken by surprise at any new example of common sense. Like, why are we doing this? Why does it matter if as senators we wear a suit and tie? It's 2023. As long as we hold the right the right issues in the right positions, and as long as we represent the people who put us here, who cares if we're in gym shorts and hoodies? John Fetterman is the person who really has made this shift. He is one of 100 senators here on Axios. Says Scoop, Schumer ditches Senate's informal dress code. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer quietly has directed the Senate Sergeant at Arms to no longer enforce the chamber's informal dress code for its members. Axios has learned. The new directive will allow Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, who tends to favor gym shorts and hoodies over the business attire traditionally required in the chamber, to linger on the Senate floor before and after votes. Senators are able to choose what they wear on the Senate floor. I will continue to wear a suit, Schumer said in a statement. Fetterman, who was elected last year, initially followed Senate tradition and wore suits, but since returning to the Senate after being treated for clinical depression earlier this year, he frequently has sported the casual look he was known for as Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor. So I believe that there is a debate that could be had. I am naturally anti-establishment. I pastor a church where I preach in holy jeans and Jordan 1s and t-shirts and have tattoos and piercings. Like that's my natural vibe. I also, for whatever reason, have a hard time picturing the 100 senators on the Senate floor all just wearing athletic wear. I have a hard time imagining myself officiating a funeral in, cargo shorts and a t-shirt. It just seems like there are certain moments and certain environments where dress matters. I do think that there is a debate that could be had. I want to get to what I think is the actual issue here. And really, it's two issues I'm combining into one. The issue of dress code is up for debate. However, it should be decided based on principle and function, not to make exception for one unmovable individual. All of this, 99 other people are now having to give into a dress code, which a lot on the right have already come out and are against. Interestingly, there's a handful of people on the left who are senators who have now come out and said we should not be doing this. But all of this is to make an exception for one person. And what that's called is the tyranny of the minority. The tyranny of the minority. 1 out of 100 is about as small of a minority as you can have. It's a minority of one. He is an army of one fighting against the evils of the dress code. And the tyranny of the minority is something that is very common because often when you get pushed into a minority position, you have very little to lose. And so you can have the loudest voice. We see this in social situations, even family situations all the time. This is like when one person in the family has gone on some obscure diet, they're gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, they're whatever free, or they're keto only, or they're whatever. And there's going to be 40 people at Thanksgiving, but this one person is gluten-free and they're very loud about it and they're very vocal about it. And they will be very offended if there aren't gluten-free options. And so now all of the 40 people who are adding to the Thanksgiving potluck, everyone has to make one dish that's normal and a gluten-free dish. They got to bring one loaf of regular rolls, yeast rolls, and one loaf and one set of gluten-free rolls. Like everyone now is under the tyranny of the minority instead of what seems obvious in just telling this one person, we would love for you to bring whatever gluten-free, soy-free, vegan-free, sugar-free, all the frees, options that you need. Like you bring whatever you need. No one's going to look sideways at you. But like everyone is not going to bend and be inconvenienced for one person. We see examples of this in scripture. The golden calf, the spies in Canaan, the demand for King Saul. These are all examples of a minority of voices swaying a nation to their cause and not a good cause. If you remember the golden calf, Moses was up on the mountain and this minority of voices come to Aaron and they want to worship the same way they worshiped back in Egypt. And so just because this group of people want to do it, everyone now has to participate. Everyone takes their earrings off and they melt it down. They make an idol. The spies who go into Canaan, there were 12 spies and it's 10 people who go in. And they get scared of the Canaanites and they sway the entire nation, 1 million plus people. 10 people are like, they're too big. We can't do it. 1 million people lose faith in God. the people say, give us a king. We want a king. And Israel needs a king. The other nations have a king. And Samuel, the prophet, is like, man, this is not what God wants. And this small minority of voices who are the loudest, and that's often how it happens. And all of these were bad things. All of these were setbacks. All of these were against God. And so we have one person, and we're going to make this change for one person, and that's poor leadership, and it's poor decision-making. If we want to have a debate about the dress code based on policy and the function of the Senate, then that's fine. You can make those decisions, but to allow one person to stand at the steering wheel. And that is not even the worst part of all of this. The worst part is that because of the tyranny of the minority, they have made a change that is partial to the people in power. It says the updated rule will go into effect this week, according to a Senate official. The change, this is key, most people have missed this in the reporting. The change applies only to senators. Staff members will still be required to follow the old dress code. So if you're an aide, if you're an intern, if you're the social media manager for John Fetterman, he gets to wear gym shorts and hoodies. You wear a suit and tie. You wear a formal dress. I've been to the Senate chambers. I've watched them there in DC, and you sit up high. You're expected as like an everyday person to dress nice. That's an expectation for me. I have to dress nice to go in. The only people who are exempt are the most powerful people in the room. And so the tyranny of the minority is being addressed, and they're making a carve out, but the carve out is favoritism toward the powerful. This has led to a situation where the senators, who are those who have the most power in the room, are exempt, while their staff and everyday people are still held to a higher standard. In James 2:9, it says, if, however, you show favoritism, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. And this is specifically about if you give deference and preferential treatment to the rich and the powerful and the elite at the expense of those who are lower on the social dynamic, lower on the power hierarchy. And so not only are we allowing one person to hold all of the cards here, not only are we making a change in leadership, change happens all the time. Change is such a good thing, but change should be strategic. You should understand first the function of what you're trying to accomplish, and then you put the forms in place under that. We know the function of what we're trying to accomplish at Meta Church. We're trying to be a church specifically for the unchurched, the de-churched, and even the anti-church. So people who will not go to church anywhere else. And out of that function, part of form is dress code. Part of form is environment and how people are going to feel. And if they have to attend, they first have to go to Men's Warehouse and buy a suit. They're not going to do it. And so we have created a casual environment for people to show up and to experience God in a real way. The Senate can have that debate, but it is poor leadership. It's poor planning. And it is really vile to make this decision where the most powerful people in the room benefit from it because of one guy, the tyranny of the minority, and everyone else is still held to the same standard. All right, now let's get to our last section. Comedian turned actor turned podcaster Russell Brand has a litany of allegations that have surfaced against him in what he has called a coordinated attack to silence his anti-establishment voice. The reports against him are extremely serious, and many believe they are credible. In response, many social media sites have already blocked or demonetized Brand, and his talent agent has left him. Many are outraged, believing he is being presumed guilty until proven innocent, backwards from how it should work. How should we think about allegations from someone's past and the ramifications that they have now in their present? You are probably caught up on this. This is like worldwide news. And this is what we do on the Clayton Tyner podcast. We try to find the nuanced views in the middle. And part of how we do that is by keeping in our minds all the time that multiple things can be true at the same time. These can be very serious and even very credible allegations. And it can be true that these have come out way after the fact. And it took reporters going to the women, including allegedly some women who did not have negative stories, which were left out of the story, and going and asking them. It can be true that the women all have testified anonymously, and it can be true that there have been no legal allegations brought at this point, only public allegations, now certainly with legal consequence, but no legal routes have been pursued, and we have to stop and wait to see that. It can be true that the nature of what is described is horrific and frankly gross in many circumstances, and that it seems like a very dangerous precedent for him to be demonetized and deplatformed and separated and culturally canceled and have money taken away before any of this has actually been proven out in a court of law. A dangerous precedent that would seem to say, if you just make the right kind of allegations against someone, you could destroy their life and destroy their livelihood almost in an instance. Now, if you aren't caught up on what's going on with Russell Brand, the New York Post has just a very simple kind of bullet point of the allegations that are against him. I'm going to read some of these. I'm going to kind of self-censor some of this for YouTube. One woman identified as Nadia alleged that Russell Brand had RAPED her against the wall of his Los Angeles home in 2012, and that she was treated at a RAPE crisis center the same day, according to medical records cited by news outlets. Another accuser, who was 16 at the time and is known only by the pseudonym Alice, alleged that the then 31-year-old called her, in quotes, the child, and assaulted her during their emotionally abusive and controlling 3-month relationship. A woman identified as Phoebe claimed he sexually assaulted her at his property in West Hollywood after they met at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, according to the Times of London. Brand allegedly trapped her in a bedroom and chased her around before pinning her down and assaulting her. The star's ex-girlfriend, Jordan Martin, made similar accusations in her self-published 2014 book. Pop star Danny Minogue angrily labeled Brand a vile predator as far back as 2006, accusing him of creeping her out by perving over her fabulous breasts and refusing to take no for an answer. Kind of what has surfaced is this idea that this was allegedly just kind of known behind the scenes, similar to how all of the things that came out about Harvey Weinstein, everyone just kind of knew about those, but Harvey Weinstein was useful to people and he got people acting roles. And so everyone just kept it on the down low, and he hung out with celebrities and he hung out with Oprah and he hung out with people, but everyone kind of knew that this was going on. And people say everyone kind of knew what was going on with Bill Cosby, and Hannibal Buress put him on blast in a comedy special. And everyone was like, wait, is this actually real? Russell Brand was just kind of known. And part of why it's known is because Russell Brand has been very, very open with this. Interestingly, I read his book, Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. I read this a few years ago. I'm a big believer in the 12-step process. And over the last 5 to 7 years, Russell Brand has publicly attempted to really turn his life around, to get free, not just from his substance abuse issues, which he's been sober from for quite some time, but then to get free from his sexual addiction. And he's been very open about this. He has publicly spoken about living a very chaste lifestyle. He got married and has stayed monogamous, according to him. He's had children. He's tried to be a dad, and he has had what he describes as a spiritual transformation. And so how do we balance this, and how do we think about this, and how would a Christian think about this, that we have this redemption and transformation, but on the other hand, we have justice and accountability, redemption and transformation versus justice and accountability. We know that in the Christian worldview, there's like nothing better than redemption. In Luke 15, Jesus said, I tell you that in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. All of heaven rejoices when one person repents, which means to change your mind, to get your life right, to stop living as a degenerate, to stop bragging about having sex with 80 women in a month, like he used to talk about, and to settle down, to be a man, to be a husband, to be a dad, all of those things. Well, what about the indiscretions from your past? So we have redemption and transformation versus justice and accountability. Galatians 6 says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that he will also reap. And so we're going to have to wait to see how the dust settles on all of this. Russell has come out and categorically denied all of this. This did not happen. This is made up. There are many who see this as exactly what Russell Brand said, a concerted conspiratorial attack on him because He's coming after the government. He's coming after Bill Gates. He's coming after Big Pharma. He's very anti-establishment. He's coming after mainstream media. Like every single day, he has over 6 million people who follow him on his YouTube account alone. And they are hearing a voice of someone who is railing against the biggest powers and biggest institutions. Many people are saying it's by no coincidence that people sheltered him in all of his sexual deviancy. But now that he is speaking out against those people and he's no longer convenient for those people, now they put together a coordinated attack. Now, let's grant that that's true. I don't know that it's true, but let's grant that that's true. The other question is, are the allegations true? And at least one of them seems like it's very credible, and we're going to have to see if they take legal action or not. And it seems credible because they claim they have actual physical evidence and that the same night that they were assaulted, they went to a crisis center and were evaluated, which means there would be a paper trail and witnesses. And there are text messages from that night between her and Russell Brand that, depending on how you interpret them, seem to be very damning, or at least potentially very damning. And so what does it mean if all of it's true? Like if all of it's true, if he has really recovered and redeemed his life and is living a more chaste lifestyle and is being a good husband and a good dad and has been for years now, and if some of these allegations are true, and if this is a coordinated attack because he's pissed off the wrong people, all of those things have the potential to be true at the same time. So let's put it in like a syllogism. A three-part syllogism is like if, then. So if Russell Brand really did any of these things, and if Russell Brand is truly reformed, then the conclusion is he should relish the opportunity to make these wrongs right. Now, a syllogism, all the parts have to be true. Both ifs have to be valid. That's how philosophy works. So if Russell Brand really did any of these things, if he didn't do these things, then that can potentially be proved out. And what's very difficult about allegations coming 10 or 20 years after they happen, or even 5 years after they happen, is that some of these things can be very difficult to prove out. It ends up being a he said, she said. And when it is widely reported on like this, it is such a character assassination that it's pretty hard to come back from. But if he did any of these things, and if he's truly reformed. Now, some people, the right says this is all a conspiracy. He did none of these things. And this is a coordinated attack to silence him and shut him up. And when YouTube does things like kick him off, and the UK Parliament sends out letters to social media companies asking for him to be removed, just so you know, that adds fuel to the fire of that side of the conspiracy theory. On the left, the conspiracy theory is he's actually never changed. So our second if, the second part of our syllogism, if Russell Brand is truly reformed, they say he's not truly reformed. This has all been a ruse, and he has been talking like this for the last 6 years so that when the allegations came up, he could have plausible deniability that the Matrix is after him, you know. But if they're both true, if he really did any of these things, even one of them, and if he's really reformed, then I believe the outcome and the balance between redemption and transformation and justice and accountability should be Russell Brand relishing the opportunity to make wrongs right. And I don't just believe that. Russell Brand believes that. And I know that because he's a massive proponent of the 12-step process. And the 12-step process is very practical. It's very linear, step by step, but it's contingent on spiritual transformation. You have to believe in a higher power. And it doesn't have to be the theistic, monotheistic, God of Christianity. You do have to have some kind of higher power. That's a part of the process. And one of the things you do is you go through in step 8 and you make a comprehensive list of every single person that you have ever wronged. And I mean, you are really supposed to be as thorough as you possibly can be, which means if any of these accusations are true, these people should have been on his list. Step 8, you just make the list. You don't do anything with it. It's in step 9 that you then go and make amends. You ask to talk to the person. You let them know you're going through this process. You let them know that you understand how you hurt them, and you see how you can make these wrong things right. Now, here's what's interesting. I know Russell Brand believes in that, or says that he believes in it. He wrote an entire book on it. And so I went to see what he says about making amends, just out of curiosity to see what he might think about this. And what I read was very interesting to me. He says some step 9s can't be made because to do so would injure them or others. And that's true. That's part of the process. If making a particular amends will harm the person you are making it to, don't make it. if it would give them information that would be painful to them, or if seeing you again would be traumatic, then refrain. These potential complications are further demonstration of the necessity for guidance in this process. And you have a guide, you have a mentor who helped you all the way through the 12 steps. A sponsor is what it's called. Similarly, if making an amends might land you in jail, it should be approached with extreme caution.
Wow.
Similarly, Brand writes, if making an amends might land you in jail, it should be approached with extreme caution. We should be willing to deal with the consequences of our actions. And many practitioners of this program say that willingness to go to any lengths to change means we should be prepared to face even jail. Many people. He's not completely saying he believes in that, but many people say that. In my personal experience, there was little of criminal nature. So this is important context. Little of criminal nature that needed to be amended. Stealing from MTV is a crime, which he talks about earlier in the book. Obviously, I was using illicit drugs, but most of my wrongs amounted to cheating and exploiting people and being incredibly selfish. Under guidance, I still concluded that a good many people would best be addressed by letter, that the last thing they would want was me looming back into their lives with combed hair and good intentions. According to his own writings and his own work, and I think Russell Brand has done an amazing job of introducing many people to the 12 steps, of being an example that you can overcome addiction and live a different life. I'm so thankful for that. I'm the biggest fan of redemption. He does say, if this could land you in jail, some people think you should do that. Some people think that you should be cautious. It is important to note, in that same context, he says, the amends I needed to make were not criminal in nature. And so what actually happened in these situations? We need time to tell. Should we be deplatforming and demonetizing people based off of nothing but allegations? Allegations that came through media, and there's nothing wrong with reporters reporting, reporters digging in. You know, you should seek to live a life above reproach so a reporter can comb through your entire past and talk to everyone you've ever touched, and there's like nothing there, you know? That's not his case. He's been very clear that's not his case. He's been very open with his promiscuity in the past. And they have found some people who feel very wronged by him. Now, they are anonymous at this point, and there's no legal action taken at this point. And part of what the freedom of speech does under the First Amendment that most people don't know, part of what it does is it assumes that the general population has enough wisdom and enough intelligence to parse through people's speech on their own. That we don't need the strong arm of the UK Parliament or the very few tech monopolies who control the public square and how speech operates now. We don't need them babysitting us and what we can hear or not. That we have the capacity to let things play out. Legal processes, investigations, allegations. I think it's very dangerous that someone can just make an allegation and know they can ruin your life. We intentionally have an innocent until proven guilty system because of that. And if we're going to reverse on that, we have to do it consistently. And I think that we would be worse off from limiting free speech to that degree, not better off. If any of these things are true, they're very serious. And we're putting a lot of emphasis on Russell Brand. But if any of these are true, we need to pray for those who are victimized as well. What's being described are the kind of things that traumatize people for life. And let's go back to our syllogism. If any of these things did happen, even one of them, and if Russell Brand truly has reformed his life, then he should relish the opportunity to make these wrongs right. There are things in our past where even though we have been redeemed and made new and created new paths for ourselves, there are decisions and actions in our past that can have consequence into our new reality and our new future. And the right thing to do if we're really seeking redemption is to embrace that and to make wrongs right, whatever it takes. I want to thank you for tuning in to episode 33 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. Man, if I can ask you one thing, subscribe to the channel. Man, we are like right there on 600. We just need like
Another one.
and then you know, one more.
Another one.
And then we'll be at 600, which is basically 600,000, which is basically 6 million. And so we are the fastest growing podcast on YouTube named the Clayton Tyner podcast. So that's something that should be celebrated. everyone who is pushing this forward, who is sharing this on their social media sites. Thank you so much. A reminder, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Clayton Tyner. That's Clayton, Tyner. Man, I love you guys, and I'll see you on episode 34.